This episode of Boss Rush Video Game Book Club is brought to you by, well, you. If you want to learn more about Boss Rush Media's family of podcasts, head on over to bossrushmedia.com or patreon.com/bossrushmedia. Thanks for your continued support.
Hello, everybody. My name is not Corey. No, this is your mad pharmacist, Stephanie, here, flying with my co-pilot here on the Boss Rush Book Club, PK Power, Pat Klein. Hi, Pat.
Hello, everybody. Hello, Steph. How you doing tonight?
I'm doing all right. It's been a stressful week, but the weekend flew by, and we're getting ready for the Thanksgiving break, so I'm looking forward to it. How about you?
Yeah, I'm. The weekend did fly by, though. I literally did like almost nothing all weekend.
Oh, I'm so jealous.
I feel like my body was trying to fight something, so I just kind of slept for the most part.
You beat game number 40?
I did beat game number 40. So listen, you'll probably have already heard what it is on the Boss Rush podcast before listening to this, but I did manage to beat Like a Dragon, Gaiden, the man who erased his name. But that isn't the game we're talking about. We're going to be talking about my game 39 that I beat, which is Alan Wake 2.
Alan Wake 2, yes. Very excited to talk about this. As we look forward to our book club, we're now starting to broaden our horizons. And what I mean by that is have a healthy mix of new games, blockbuster games, indie games, retro games, right? So far we've done Final Fantasy 16, The Legend of Zelda, Tears of the Kingdom. There will be Spider-Man 2. So, what a year to have or kick off our book club with 2023 games. So, Corey hated Alan Wake, the first one, so much that he bowed out of Alan Wake 2, which I can understand. The game's not for everyone, but I don't know about you, but I think he missed out on a pretty awesome sequel.
I think so too. Honestly, since he said he did like Control, I would think he would like this game because this was more in remnants of Control than it was of Alan Wake, in my opinion. This game did take a lot of what Alan Wake was and basically threw away the parts that didn't seem to work too well and just built on the parts that did.
Exactly.
And completely reinvented the game.
Exactly. Well, I guess this is where we're where the rubber meets the road. I need some caffeine, dude. Anyway, so again, it's November 19th. We're doing the book club for Alan Wake 2. Pat and I will do our best to have an engaging and fun discussion. We will start with non-spoilers, and then we will let you know when we hit spoiler territory. Does that sound like a plan, Pat?
I think that works out just fine by me.
Awesome. So Alan Wake 2 is a survival horror video game, which technically the predecessor, Alan Wake, was action adventure. This is more classified as survival horror by Remedy Entertainment, also the makers of Control, published by Epic, and it released October 27th, 2023. It is the sequel to Alan Wake, originally released in 2010, that follows the best-selling horror novelist Alan Wake, who has been trapped in the dark place for the last 13 years, and his attempts to escape by writing himself out of the dark place, and fortunately or unfortunately involving an FBI agent named Saga Anderson.
And with Saga comes her partner named Casey, or Alex Casey, who is also the same name as Alan Wake's current protagonist in his book series. Is that a coincidence? I don't know. We will discuss that a little bit later on.
Another fun fact that I'm sure most people know, and you can explain it better than I can, but the modeling for Alex Casey is Sam Lake, the writer of Alan Wake games, right?
Yeah. The cool thing about about Alan Wake 2 is that it has a lot of Easter eggs to Remedy's other games. In fact, it almost one could feel like all of Remedy's games take place in the exact same universe. The fact that Sam Lake was modeled, or Alex Casey was modeled after Sam Lake, the creative director of the game, is also a nod to the fact that Sam Lake was also modeled after Max Payne, their original
Mm.
series that they were famous for. And Max Payne kind of did the exact same thing that Alex Casey does with his nonsensical, like, or with his more of like internal monologuing of his thoughts through like shadowy blotches in the game. So it was that was a big nod to Max Payne. There are other
Okay.
nods to the game, such as the Federal Bureau of Control, which is
Mm.
from the Control series. There's a character in this game, Officer Tim Breaker, who is
Mm.
who is played by Sean Ashmore, who was the main character in Quantum Theory. Not the exact same character, but the same type of like character
Mm.
uh, from Quantum Theory. So there's a lot of throwbacks to other Remedy games in this.
Yeah, and although I'll admit I haven't really played a lot of the other Remedy games. I came into it like educating myself about this, and I felt like they did a really good job intertwining. I don't know if it was something that they just decided to retcon it, and they just retconned it really well, or if this was their plan all along. But
You know what? It felt like this might be what they wanted to do once they got to Control. Um,
mm,
I mean, I think they've always thought about creating a combined universe, but it really didn't happen until Control started bringing in elements of the Alan Wake universe into its game.
oh right, because didn't Controls like DLC had to do with the original like Alan Wake
Yep.
plot? Yeah, or investigating
And
what happened.
even just in the game, you could find notes where the Federal Bureau of Control was actually like investigating the incidences at Bright Fall and Cauldron Lake, and there would be interviews with Alice Wake,
Mm.
like just reports about like what happened at Bright Falls, just little Easter eggs that you can find here and there.
Yeah. Definitely shows that a lot of love and attention detail went into this. So,
Hmm.
should we start with non-spoilery first impressions?
Yeah, yeah. So, what did you personally think of Alan Wake 2?
I loved it, and I know maybe that doesn't carry a lot of weight because I tend to speak more positively to games if people have listened to me on the Boss Rush podcast. But it's not just a game that I enjoyed. I really, really loved it when I was not expecting to. Because I'll admit, when I played Alan Wake Remastered, it was okay. When I say okay, I mean I can see why it got a lot of love and had a huge fan base for Alan Wake and why people would be excited for the sequel. But in itself, I just didn't have the most fun time.
Hmm.
The dodging and the running slow and clunky, and yeah, it was okay. But like,
The game still shows its age. I
yeah,
feel like it
exactly.
is a 13-year-old game.
Well, see, that's the other thing I need to tell myself. Like, this is a 13-year-old game. I really shouldn't be judging it by today's gaming standards. So that's why I probably didn't poo poo on it as much as Corey did. And I think
Hmm.
the other factor, and it's purely a me thing, is I am a writer, part-time writer, not a famous writer, but I do write novels. So kind of seeing and experiencing the personality of Alan Wake. Thankfully, I don't share the personality that Alan Wake has. I don't know. It intrigued me. So
You
with
haven't gone to substance abuse?
no, not yet. No,
No,
not
you haven't gone and beating up your domestic partner?
nope.
Well, technically, you didn't beat her up, just
But
more
he
emotional
wasn't.
abuse.
Yeah, wasn't really that nice to her. Yeah, a little
Yeah.
egotistical. So with that
Oh well, you
base,
you carry that part at least.
okay, yeah.
Just
So
kidding.
that's
Just
why I'm.
kidding.
That's why I'm on a podcast, right? I don't like to hear myself talk.
Hmm.
So with that, I had enough interest to say, okay, I get why people like this. I feel that Alan Wake 2 I feel like I would at minimum like it because it's got to at least be up to date with the controls and everything. Alan Wake 2 exceeded my expectations, primarily because of the art direction. They were very clever with how they deliver the story with the mix of gameplay, obviously, then like the full motion, like actor portrayals in there, and the very unique ways they deliver the story. We'll get to it. One of my favorite chapters was one you gave me a heads up on. It was chapter 4 for Wake's side. I've been listening to Herald of Darkness on repeat for the last 2 weeks. Um, and yeah, I just felt like everything was very cleverly written and just very deep. And it just held me at the edge of the seat until the very end. So I was pleasantly surprised by how much I loved the game. Not without its faults. There are a couple things I'm happy to nitpick, but I it's really fighting for its place on Game of the Year for me.
Yeah, I think it really shocked a lot of people that this game just came out of left field. Like people,
Mhm.
Alan Wake had its cult following, but no one was expecting it to become Game of the Year material. And like when the Golden Joysticks came out with their nominations, even before the game came out, the Alan Wake had several different categories on that Game of the Year, and people were like, "What?" This is even before reviews came out, and then reviews came out, and the game was getting 9s and 10s across the board. It surprised a lot of people, but at the same time, I'm almost surprised that it did surprise people because Control was considered a massive contender for Game of the Year when it came out. And it came out against some pretty heavy hitters as well. Remedy just keeps getting better with their games. And I feel that if Alan Wake doesn't get Game of the Year, chances are the next Remedy game might
Mm.
be able to surpass that and achieve what Alan Wake did not.
Yeah. Do you think it might also just be subject matter? Like I haven't played Control yet. Now I definitely want to.
Mhm.
Because the people that I've talked to, not that there's a ton of them, excuse me, that don't like Alan Wake, they just don't seem to like maybe that type of a game. I don't know. Like maybe it's one of those games where no matter how well executed the game is, maybe it's just, some people they just don't like X. Like some people just don't like football. Some people just don't
Mhm.
like margaritas. Like they just don't like the thing no matter how perfectly made it is.
I mean, it could very well be one of the things that makes Alan Wake very different compared to other games is that Alan Wake is considered an unreliable narrator. Like
Mhm.
his the way he explains his events may not actually be what's really happening. It's happening in his mind, but that may not necessarily be the whole story
Mhm.
that's going on. So that it could have added to some confusion to the story. Whereas Control, that's more seen on a different level, um, where Jesse necessarily was not the actual narrator of that story.
I see what you mean. Okay. Mhm.
Yeah. I mean, it could be that. Again, it could also be the just how the gameplay originally was in one. Like you said,
Mhm.
kind of clunky. Not like everything was just kind of point a light at it and then fire.
Mhm.
And then everything just kind of blended in and looked the same
Yeah.
with the foresty bright
Yeah.
balls.
Yeah, I do hear, some people like, "Oh, the game's too dark." I kind of find that type of a comment interesting because I'm like, well, it is a game that does deal with light and darkness. So, I
Hmm.
mean, technically, you do expect a lot of darkness, but I don't know. I've never had that problem, so whatever.
Yeah, I mean, even in this one, I did have issues with the whole lighting of the
Mm,
game. Just first off, the lighting in the game is actually very incredible. The ray tracing that they used in this is absolutely perfect.
how'd
The
you play it?
shadows.
Performance or the other one?
I played it with the preference to graphics.
Me too.
So yeah.
Sorry,
So
go
what
ahead.
is that quality? I think it's called. Or I
You're
don't
talking
know.
about like sunsets and
Yeah,
lighting, ray tracing.
the ray tracing, like the shadows made, like you could have the game being in the evening, like before the sun fully sets, but the way the sun hits the trees makes everything look darker with the shadows encompassing the rest of the map.
Mhm.
It was very crazy how that looked. The this game is absolutely beautiful, especially when it comes to its use of lights and kind of like effects like mist and rain,
Mhm.
but
Oh
definitely
yeah.
light and darkness.
I know we'll get more in depth, but are there any, like, since you mentioned having some issues with seeing in darkness, what were your kind of like things that weren't the best? I don't know, because it got to be balanced.
Yeah. I would also say the way the story breaks itself up in terms of like main story and then optional side quest stuff, that it it felt like they weren't putting any like priority on the side quests, and like that the side quests themselves was like entirely like its own game. Like
Mm.
there are areas that you probably wouldn't even touch if you weren't interested in going around and checking out the side quest. Like the game would be like, oh, I can go back to Bright Falls and continue the story, or now that the event has lowered the water levels, I can go around and explore. It is entirely up to you and how you
Yeah,
want to do that.
that is very true. Hmm.
But I don't know, like as somewhat fun it was to explore, it also really wasn't as fun because it wasted a lot of your supplies that you ended up like trying to accumulate, because you would run into a lot of different monsters, especially wolves,
Mm.
and I absolutely hated them. Unless you had like whenever there was a wolf around, I would just have to take out my shotgun because I did not want to waste any other bullets. It's like I'm just gonna hit you when you come at me close range, and that
Yep.
usually takes them down in one shot.
Yeah, right before they pounce, right? And I
Hmm.
believe you heard me kind of not complain, but constructively criticize this portion, and I do want to bring it up here because this is the actual book club, because everybody agrees. If anyone out there listening knows Pat and knows me, Pat is the actual gamer, the good gamer. I love video games, but I am terrible at it. I can walk off a cliff 3 times and not even like have the mental wherewithal to learn the first time around. So like when I play a game, I'm really not that great at it. I love it though. So
Oh.
I say that as a preface because my challenge here, and I said this before, I came to this game learning it is a survival horror game. So my brain thought, oh, more like Resident Evil 2 than the way I'd handle Resident Evil 4. But the enemies were bullet sponges, but it's not like you can shoot one in the knee and it'll fall down and be slow, because then you got the super fast ones that go
Mhm.
all over the place. And like you
And
said, you
the
got the
idea is you're supposed to shoot them with your flashlight, and that stops them from running. But then it's so hard to aim at it with the flashlight. And then your flashlight, it seems like, I don't know, like I've had trouble getting my flashlight to like fully work on them.
yes, and there'd be sometimes where I feel like when you're close enough, you'll lock on with the flashlight, but
Hmm.
not always. And then I'll be shining the light, like wasting my battery in nowhere else, and I
Yeah.
can't stop the animation.
Hmm.
Um,
No,
and
a lot of my technique ended up like as soon as the darkness shield dissipated, I immediately started shooting at them before they started running again.
okay, yeah, that makes
That
sense.
was my strategy. Was like hear the pop and then.
Yep. But no, I agree. I initially was very turned off exploring additional places or doubling back because I just felt like, was it worth losing 3/4 of the bullets that I had just to get a stash, which, like,
Hmm.
okay, cool, I got supplies, but I already wasted the supplies to get the supplies. So I eventually still made my way, and we can talk about later. Like, I did complete some of these side quests in the end, but not all of
Hmm.
them, and it wasn't enticing given what you had to sacrifice to get there.
Yeah, I would say another one of my big complaint about the side quests was how Saga handled the side quests.
Mm,
Saga, the in Alan Wake and Saga both had a unique aspect to their sides of the story. Saga had a detective mind board that she would like pin
yes.
up pictures and string up possibilities. One of these would be the side quest, and it was literally just putting photos of things that you already found and then coming up with some little conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
I don't think they handled her mind board very well. I loved her profiling part,
Mm,
but the mind board itself, like there were clues that I was still missing. Then I had
yeah.
clues that I could not use until those other clues were found, but I don't think I could ever get those other clues again because I already passed that part of the story.
I
So
think
I my
that's. Go ahead.
yeah,
Finish.
my mind
Finish.
board was not complete, but yeah, it was like almost unnecessary because of it.
See, that's what got me in one of them. So Alex, the Alex Casey lunchboxes. When I say 100%ed, I found them all,
Hmm.
and then and I noticed the one of the things on the mind board, other than the locations, is who is behind it. We obviously know who ended up being behind it, just the way the story progressed. But just by knowing or discovering who it was, I couldn't auto populate the board. And when I clicked on it, it says you need to interview people. And I went all around. I went back to rows and it didn't have the option. So I think I might have passed a point in the game where I no
Hmm.
longer have access to that dialogue. But when I found all the lunchboxes, Saga's like, "Whoop, this case is closed." I'm like, "It's not closed. There are missing spots on the board." And my OCD just
Exactly.
went overdrive. I'm like, "No, it's not
Yeah,
done."
it was like it was an attempt of an idea, but it was
Mm.
like they put either too much detail in the ideas that most of it was just completely unnecessary until they get to the part where it's like, oh, we're not progressing further until you come up with a conclusion here.
Exactly. Great framework and foundation. I love the concept or idea of it, but yeah, there are
Hmm.
parts of it that was, yeah.
Yeah. Now, on the plus side, the flip side of this is Alan Wake's storyboard.
Ooh, mhm,
Now that I actually did like that what it does. In Alan Wake's gameplay, he has the ability to take a scene of whatever the room that he's in, and he plants an idea
mhm,
onto the storyboard of this room, and that will change the complete appearance of the room, enemy
mhm,
placement, note placement, echoes, even like it changes things up. Like it could be you could be in a normal hotel room, but then all of a
mhm,
sudden you put down like like a cult, or you put down the note of the devil.
mhm.
And all of a sudden, the room is all bloody with corpses scattered around because of some madman that went through the hotel and started murdering people left and right.
Right, and it from a OCD person, like, it's not like you're left to fill in a board, you can interchange, pull them and take them. Some
Hmm.
might not really have any true outcome, so to speak, other than the visual, but I loved it, and I love that you can take
Hmm.
one area, and you're right, you can change it up,
Hmm.
like, 3 times, which I think is very efficient use of the setting.
Yep, very much so. That was a really cool feature of that gameplay side, the Alan Wake. You can also take the story. You can switch between the two characters after a certain point. So you could either play through Saga's story and completion. You can play through Alan's story to completion. You can play, chapter by chapter by just, switching between the two characters up until a certain point, in which
Mhm.
then the characters' story ties back together, and then you get your conclusion.
Yeah. Wow.
Hmm.
Speaking of conclusion, do you think we're ready to enter spoiler territory, or is there
I
anything
think
else you
we're
wanna
ready.
cover?
Well, I mean, I kind of said my piece of
Yeah.
what I liked and what I didn't like about this game.
Okay.
Other than, of course, the music, of course, is an absolute amazing thing about the game. It's
Home run.
probably my favorite part of the game was the music.
Yeah.
If you did play Alan Wake 1, you know that the game Alan Wake was broken out into like episodes,
Mhm.
where at the end they would have like a musical interlude. Luckily, though, they didn't bring back previously on Alan Wake.
Yeah, I think that they made it more sophisticated. They still broke it down by chapters, but, like,
hmm
it didn't have that kind of cheesy, and I'm not saying it was cheesy then, I'm sure it was cool back then, but cheesy now, like, the logo flashing and blah, blah, blah. It's just it ends, cuts to black, plays the music, and then I think just the transition smoother, and then whatever, like, font they use, it's like chapter, and
hmm
it's very visually astounding.
Yeah. So yeah, that's kind of the lowdown on how the gameplay works. So I
Yeah.
say we can probably move on to the plot. Well, before we move on to the plot, I guess just a quick, tiny recap of Alan Wake 1. Alan Wake, a writer, decides to go on vacation to try to save a marriage with his wife and also overcome a writer's block that he has. He was recommended by his agent to a place called Bright Falls, a small western or a small town in Washington, and they go on their romantic getaway. However, the cabin in the lake is being haunted by a spirit that eventually traps Alan Wake's wife in this other side of the lake, and Alan has to try to. Uh, Alan finds out that sometime he blacked out and wrote an entire manuscript, which he needs to figure out where these pages are and what the conclusion is to the story, and then possibly change the conclusion. Which ended with him finding a magical thing called the clicker from a lady named Cynthia Weaver. And he goes back to the lake. He fights off a witch who the Dark Presence is currently using. I think her name was Barbara something.
Yeah, it was, Tom Zane's, like, wife or lover or
Yeah, it's
something.
Tom Zane's lover who drowned in the lake prior. Tom Zane being another author who was kind of trapped, I guess, by the Dark Presence as well.
Yeah, the Dark
Um,
Presence attracts artists from all over the world to kind of prey upon, so to speak.
hmm Yeah, the Dark Presence needs these artists to kind of realize its dreams to basically be loved and admired and just control everything
Mhm,
by using these creative people to create those scenarios where that situation happens. In the end, Alan Wake thrusts his clicker into not Cynthia, Barbara's
Barbara.
heart and clicks it on, filling her with light. And we think that kind of dissipates the dark presence enough that Alan Wake can create an ending where his wife Alice gets out of the lake, but it leaves him trapped in the dark place where
Mhm.
Alice was, and now Alan Wake has been spending the last 13 years trying to write himself back out, but in a way that he doesn't bring the dark presence with him.
Exactly, and, man, Cynthia Weaver, man, that talk about continuity between the 1st and 2nd game, we'll get to her. What happened to her? Holy cow.
No, the game did her rotten. I like.
I know, and of all women who was, like, not all women, like, of all people, like, she was obsessed with light, like, she was, like,
hmm
prepared. She was the
Yeah,
doomsday person, and, anyway,
yeah, yeah. We'll
yeah.
get there.
But great summary, absolutely, and the sequel kind of picks right back up, although the game starts in a very different way, one that I definitely did not expect. I don't know if, Pat, you did
I
expect
did
this.
not expect to play a fat naked man
Mhm.
running through a muddy lake.
Yeah, it's pretty bad, and you really don't know what's going on. You pass through this like big tree with these roots, and there's people in the distance that they're eyewitnesses. You still don't know who they are yet, and unfortunately, you do get caught up. No matter how good of a gamer you are, by these people in deer mask, and they tie you down and kill you.
Yep,
Uh,
they cut out your heart.
yep, and it just. They do the Temple of Doom on it's Temple of Doom, right? Temple of Doom on you.
Yep,
Just
the Kalema! Kalema!
ah! And that's how Alan Wake 2 begins.
Yep. So then we fast forward to a car driving through the woods of Washington, with the driver being a new character, Saga Anderson, and her partner, Alex Casey.
They like to
Both,
drink coffee at the same time.
yep, very stoic looking, like they drink their coffee at the same time, and so that's kind of your first clue. Like, are these people for real? Like, why are they doing this at the same time? And I don't
Exactly.
know if we fully got the answer to that, or if that was just some little, uh, I guess, some little like red herring the game might have thrown at you.
Maybe, yeah. Yeah, there's a lot of those, but yeah, there is that uncanniness. But as they're driving, Alex is basically putting Saga as the lead of this case. Again, I don't know if that's more of a foreshadowing of like what Alex might be considering, which we would think is retirement, but maybe something else. We don't know.
Hmm.
And they're there to investigate, these. I don't know if at that time it was a string of murders, but definitely investigating this man's
Yeah,
death.
there was 3 murders I think prior, and this was a murder that happened just a few days after.
Hmm.
Like they were already on their way to
Yeah.
investigate it, and this murder just happened
Hmm.
while they were on their way investigating it.
Yep. And they meet up with the local officers. I believe it's like Mulligan and let me see, Thornton.
Yep, and they're the typical trope of hillbilly or like
Hmm.
small town
Yeah,
idiot help that you typically expect to find in these ones, where
exactly.
they're not bright. They're more prone to shoot first and ask questions later, or not even at all.
Exactly. And then just eventually, as Saga and Alex get to the murder scene, they realize or they learn eventually that this corpse was that of Nightingale, who is the first character that we see revisit the game. He was an FBI agent. I believe he was kind of a drunk,
Hmm.
definitely a jerk, and he got whisked away by the dark presence in the first game. And
Yep.
he got either really fat or really bloated or both by this time. So,
Yeah, it's probably definitely both in
yeah.
this case, but a lot of uh, the victims were tied to a similar MO about being bloated from the lake
Yep.
and having their heart cut out, which
Exactly.
is the thing that made this one different. However, was that the heart was not taken away; it was still at the scene at the time. The cultists never actually got to finish their ritual with
Exactly. And
this
I,
one.
I was gonna say cult is definitely a strong it came off pretty strong immediately because, well, first the deer masks, right? But also there was like
Hmm.
writing on the body, writing on the heart. Like there's something that these people were trying to achieve. And that's kind of your first few chapters. You start off as Saga, you go to the town of Bright Falls where the body is going to be delivered. You interview the two characters that were there in the woods to witness this man walking through the woods.
Yep.
And eventually you get to, well, Saga was going to perform it herself, the autopsy of Nightingale.
Hmm. And she notices a few things that are just kind of weird about that. She starts asking questions to the local sheriff, and the sheriff is about ready to give her a file.
Tim
But then,
Breaker.
yep, Sheriff Tim Breaker, played by Sean Ashmore. And just before he gives her the file, he magically disappears, and all hell breaks loose in the morgue.
Yes, Nightingale kind of wakes up and he's after you. Except obviously if you're in the light. And I'll admit, I kind of got a little freaked out there. I mean, partially because I'm still trying to figure out how the game worked, but
Hmm.
it's a tight space, and these characters are pretty strong.
And not only that, not only is he a corpse, he is a fat, naked corpse of a
Naked
very
corpse, yeah.
large man who is running after you. So it's kind of freaky.
Mm-hmm.
Just even if he wasn't a corpse, that large naked man running after you kind of makes
Yeah.
things a little weird.
Yeah, yeah. I'm pretty sure around that time, right? Saga is also starting to find or hear about these manuscript pages that are appearing.
Yeah,
So yeah,
including a manuscript page that was stuffed inside um, Nightingale's chest cavity.
well, yep, there you go. So they have to go after Nightingale because nothing more dangerous than a dead, naked, fat guy running around. I
Yeah,
think
he escapes the morgue.
yeah, he escapes the morgue, and Alex says that at one point he investigated a murder cult back in New York, and that murder cult had to do with they were referencing Alan Wake and almost kind of copycatting his murder scenes from his novels.
Hmm
And he was aware that Nightingale did travel to Bright Falls. Although, like he said, he made this admission like it was a terrible thing. I don't know if it really was. It was just like a little bit of information. Like again, that sense of, "Ooh, is this all happening on purpose? Is this all
hmm
real? What's going on?" Because I feel like some of this kind of comes back on the Wake side of the game.
Yeah, and also Alex knows of the connection between him and Alan Wake's character of Alex Casey. He gets made fun of it a lot.
Yeah, he's not a fan.
Yeah, he's not a fan of that. And so before we start, no, actually, we still go and run after Nightingale. So Nightingale it was told that he went back to the Cauldron Lake, and so your character runs back to the woods. It is starting to get dark in the woods now. So this is where you start finally running into the Taken, which are these shadowy people that were taken in by the dark presence and eventually morphed into nonsensical killers. Um,
Hmm.
and that you get your very first appearance of one when they bust right through the wall of a broken down convenience store.
Yeah, yeah. Oh gosh, that definitely gave me a little bit of a jump scare. But yeah, it's essentially kind of like it's the same principle, so to speak, as the shadow folk in the first game. You shine light, you shoot them. They're bullet sponges for sure. After kind of going about and trying to figure out what you need to do with Nightingale's heart that's located in a freezer, and you got to put it through here, that you basically have to complete this ritual, and that will open up something
The
called an
overlay.
overlap. Overlap?
Oh, yeah, the
Overlay?
overlap. Thank you.
Yeah.
hmm
I have a hard time describing what it is other than it's almost like going into an alternate dimension that's kind of like the dark place, so to speak.
It is where the real world and the dark place are the thinnest.
Yeah, there you go. Yep.
It it's a place where the dark world is bleeding into the real world. Or sorry, the
Hmm.
dark place is bleeding into the real world.
Yeah, great, perfect. And
hmm
this is kind of where this is where we start seeing like a theme, and like basically every chapter going forward with Saga is something like that. You are at a new place, gathering clues, eventually discover an overlap. You need to do the thing to get into the overlap, and then you fight a boss. So
hmm
here, you're repeatedly doing a loop that gets progressively creepier in the woods, which this was hard for me. I'll admit, like this is a part where I kind of got lost a lot because I'm like, oh, it's dark in here.
Yeah.
Um, and you have a boss fight, and I would really love to know your thoughts because I struggled through this one, and that also is a theme going
The
forward.
problem with this boss fight is you do not have a whole lot of equipment and ammo to start off with, and so you're constantly on the run to find more supplies while you're being chased around by the naked man. But this time, the naked man is carrying along a gigantic tree branch that's kind of like a tree log, almost like he grabbed a
Yeah.
tree and ripped it.
He's got range, and for a big dude, he could just disappear and appear like right before you. I'm like, dude, I don't even have time to finish my reload animation. I get the crap beat out of me.
Yeah. I mean, it takes at least 30 good shots to actually put this guy down.
Yeah.
Um, And so, but luckily you finally do, and the loop breaks, and all of a sudden you find yourself back in the shores of Cauldron Lake, but someone magically had appeared.
Yeah, none other than drumroll
Alan
Wake,
Wake.
looking super confused. His hair got really long,
Got a
and
beard.
he's got a beard, and he's very disoriented and,
Very frantic.
frantic. And we're trying to figure out, is this the real Alan Wake?
Mm-hmm.
He explains that he was writing a new novel, which at first I got confused because the words return was thrown around, but also initiation as well. But I
Mm-hmm.
believe.
Well, Return is the novel that is currently, like, it's the manuscript that is on the Bright Falls side.
Mhm. Okay.
That is the one that everyone that's supposed to bring him back.
Hmm.
Um, but then, when Alan Wake is describing, we are kind of put into his shoes of the events that got him over to where he is now in Bright Falls.
Hmm.
Um, and it's very weird. The dark place. It takes more of an approach of using full motion video versus actual gameplay.
Hmm.
And Alan Wake finds himself like missing his memories, but apparently having done things before.
Yep.
One of the things that he ends up doing is that he sits on a TV show. I forget what it's called, but it's something something
In
with Mister
between with Mr. Door.
In Between with Mister Door.
Oof. And if anything gave me creepy, well, there's a lot of things that were creepy about this game, but this is one of those parts of the game where it wasn't scary, but definitely gave me super creep vibes. I'm like, what? There's something way more to this. And every time, every chapter he needs to start this show, and Alan's like, "What the heck's going on here?" And Mr. Door acts like he doesn't know what he's talking about. Oh, look, here's your character, Alex Casey, joining us and stuff like that.
Yeah, and Alex Casey it is Sam Lake being Sam Lake playing Sam Lake, who was the actor of Alex Casey, and Alan Wake is absolutely confused about what's going on or why he's even there, and the characters kind of have to like lead him on almost,
Hmm.
making it like one of the world's most uncomfortable interviews.
Yeah, yeah. The acting's pretty good. Like, man, this is like, the awkwardness is palpable.
Mm-hmm.
And then at one point or other, the show ends and you find a way to navigate your way out. And that's where I feel like every chapter with Alan Wake, for a time anyway, is him starting there but finding a way out, whether it's most
Mm-hmm.
of the time it's out and then into kind of a messed up version of New York. uh,
Yep.
very
Yeah.
I really love the way it looked. Not only was it eerie, but if you look at all the graffiti and all the things typed on the subway signs and everything, it's clearly talking to you, the player. It's very meta, and I loved it.
Yeah. Before we got to the New York, we did meet one other character while
Yeah.
escaping the TV series. And those who played Control were immediately excited by this guy's return. It is Ati the janitor. Give you a little bit of backstory. Ati was the janitor in the game Control, and you find out, or you get the feeling, you don't really find out, but you definitely get the feeling that Ati is not a normal human being. In fact, he might not even be human at all because he has the most knowledge out of anyone and seems to have been with the oldest house since the oldest house has been formed. So he's a little bit of the supernatural, but he's also very Finnish,
Oh, his
and
Finnish
he ends up
sayings.
speaking like half his lines in Finnish, and then just kind of jokes around, in English, and he does. It sounds like he doesn't know really what he's speaking of, but you also get the feeling that he knows more than he should.
Exactly. And this is where I'm like even more excited to go to Control because I grew to really love Ati in this game. And that's one thing that like you immediately connect and understand is you see Ati in the Dark Place in Alan Wake's chapters, but then you see Ati in Saga's chapters in the real world. I'm
Mhm.
like, all right, people normally can't just go between realms like that.
Yeah. What's also, if you did finish Control and you finished Control doing all of Ati's requests, he sends Jesse a postcard from Watery, Washington.
No way.
No one knew what that meant until this game came out.
That is so brilliant. Wow.
Yeah, so it was planned. But Adi is absolutely cool. He's that lovable elderly man, well, more middle-aged man, but just that elderly foreign character that you just kind of grow attached to, and he's got a marvelous singing voice.
Yes, he does. Audie and the janitors, right? Is that what the
Yep.
I think between him and Tim Breaker, which you'll find, or maybe you might hear him first humming on the Alan Wake side of things. Carry on if you don't mind. The two
Yeah, Tim
characters.
Breaker. Uh, you find our old friend Tim Breaker while you're wandering through the city, and Tim um, knows about Alan Wake because Tim grew up in Bright Falls, but this is the same sheriff that disappeared that before he was able to give Saga his files on the Alan Wake case, and as well as some old manuscript pages that he found. Um, Tim Schaefer, the sheriff, has been looking for a guy named Mr. Dorr, who we seem to think is the television host, but he's like, nah, that doesn't sound like him. Like he'd be many personalities, but I don't think that would be that personality.
Mhm.
Um, but he's looking for this Mr. Dorr because Mr. Dorr is apparently the one that's, you know, that brought him there, and he's trying to figure out why Mr. Dorr brought him to this side.
Yeah, thank you for that. So we're kind of in a place where w- we go back and forth between the characters, and soon we be able to switch between the two. But the point being is when Alan Wake returns from the dark place, he's saying that this guy or thing called Scratch is trying to leave permanently from the dark place. And he's doing that by kind of editing over his manuscript. And by doing
Mm-hmm.
that, it's altering reality. And it gets very personal with Saga because now she's starting to hear either from people or read things where either they sincerely believe that she'd had a life in Watery, Washington, and that her daughter, Logan, had died. Which to her, it's like, no, my daughter is back at home and I've never lived here in Watery. So things are starting to get real freaky.
Mm-hmm. Now, when this first happened, what did you think? Did you believe what Saga was thinking, that the story is like messing it up? Or did you believe that Saga is actually crazy and that she's repressed these memories of her daughter being dead?
I think I was going with the writing changing reality because of the whole Alan Wake side of things. I was like, well, this is a place where his writing did start coming true in the first game. So I would
Mhm.
like to think that. So that's how I initially started interpreting it. How about you?
I think I immediately went to, oh, I'm pretty sure that she's kind of messed up in her head.
Ah,
And
okay.
that maybe, because the way Alan Wake described it is that Scratch is creating the story to hurt everyone around him.
Mhm.
And I feel like it would hurt more if Saga believed that her daughter was alive and then being told that it's dead, almost like reliving the grief
Uh-huh.
over and over again. So I personally think that the daughter's dead.
Ooh. I know. I love how
Hmm.
they really leave it up to us to try and think about. So it's gosh, it just gets even more interesting, right? So if we follow Saga right away, the next portion is to kind of figure out her life in Watery while gathering clues, essentially. So she meets lots of characters along the way. Ilmo
Mhm.
and Yako Koskela.
Yep.
Really great duo. I love their commercials.
They're basically the everything and everything of Watery. They
Hmm.
are uh, the creators of a lot of the businesses there. They own their own theme park. They manage uh, the trailer parks. They brew their own beer. They have their
Hmm.
own motorcycle club. Like they are basically everything and everything, including a few extra things that we learn fairly shortly in this chapter.
Yes.
They
Um,
also create some very funny commercials on TV.
they really do. Um, I don't know what else you want to add because I probably just want to start talking a little bit about Coffee World because that probably is next to the nursing home, probably one of my favorite areas just because it was very creepy. It succeeded in being very creepy.
Well, we do get our first, like, if you haven't played Control, you do get your first idea that Ati is not exactly a normal being in this game because we see him in the town
Yep,
singing
he is singing,
singing his song.
and for the
And
longest
we also
time,
see a bunch of senior citizens running around in bath towels.
yeah, yeah, there was like a sauna nearby.
Hmm.
Watery is a very depressing looking place. No offense to Watery. I was like, ooh, there's like three buildings there.
That is small town for you when
Yeah.
it's all built on like one industry.
Yep. So when you talk to the Koskela brothers, she decides to kind of play along, and she asks to see her trailer, but they need to get her key, which is in the gift shop of Coffee World. And since the road is being fixed, you need to go through the woods to get to Coffee World.
Hmm. Yeah, they kind of come up to they're one of the first few people that are like, yeah, you lived here before and your daughter's dead, but I guess we understand you're being a federal agent first, so personal story aside, here you go.
Yeah, exactly. So,
But yeah,
mhm. I
you you have to take the back roads to Coffee World.
Yeah, that I was very creeped out by everything. You're kind of in the marshes, you see eerie lights and colors in the distance. Then you hear like this eerie laughter that comes from like one of the machines or whatever rides. And you enter Coffee World. It is in an amusement park that's coffee themed and it's abandoned, so you know something happened. The workers aren't there anymore. I do like the puzzle to get to your key or whatever that
Hmm.
was. But you do have to go through a few of the amusements to kind of get the MacGuffins, and you
Yep.
fight some Taken there and bullet sponges as well.
Hmm. Yeah, and so you find out that well, you get your key.
Mhm.
Uh, Coffee World's just man, that place was pretty damn creepy. Even if you imagine that place like fully lit up and like active with like kids and stuff, it just seemed like that was a weird place for an amusement park.
It really is, and I just don't like the mascot, that creepy smiling pot of coffee. I'm like,
The,
oh,
did you know you could shoot any of those wooden mascots and you get a trophy?
that must be one of the trophies I'm missing. Then, dang it! All right,
Mm-hmm.
I'll do that.
Yep. But yeah, you get the key and you go to you make your way down to the trailer park, and you find two of the returning characters from Alan Wake One, two of the most awesome returning characters from Alan Wake One, Tor and Odin,
Yep, from the old
members of the old gods of Asgard,
Asgard,
and
and
they are drunk as raccoons in
oh yeah.
piss. I don't know.
They're like, "Don't drink the water, don't trust the water." Like, they immediately give off this vibe that they either must know something that others don't, or they're immune to the effects of the story. Although they claim that Saga is, was it Tor's granddaughter, I believe.
She is Tor's
Yep.
granddaughter. They share the same last name, the
Mhm.
Andersons.
Exactly. So something we get to figure out later. But while you're doing your research, she sees them kind of associating, like via a picture. I think I do with a picture with the cult of the tree. So she's trying to seek out more answers, whether it's in the trailer park and later on the motorcycle club. I think that's kind of those areas that you explore.
Yeah, the clues kind of lead to the fact that the tree has connections to the motorcycle club.
Yep.
Or the cult of the tree has connections to the motorcycle club. She also finds evidence of her daughter's death. So she's still kind of like, no, this isn't happening. This is just messing with me. I need to find more manuscript pages and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, you're really starting to wonder, like, oh goodness, I'm seeing these newspaper clippings, and when you pin it on the board, she scratches it out. I'm like, ooh, I don't know what's really true anymore. Um, and I don't
Yep,
know. I don't
she's
want to.
becoming unreliable herself now.
Yep. In to continue to advance this story here, this next section's bosses or the overlap has to do with Mulligan and Thornton, right?
But
Am I correct?
before you advance there, we do come to the realization that Ilmo and Jocko
Oh,
are, in fact, the cult of the tree. And not only are they the cult of the tree, they are the heads
the heads of it. Yeah.
of the cult of the tree.
Yep. Yep.
And then you figure out how to get the overlay to open up, which was building up this float using very interesting component. The float was a very interesting, I guess, diorama of the history of watery, which
Also
was
creepy.
brutal.
You need like a moose skull, a knife, the creepy laughter. I was like, holy crap, what
Mm-hmm.
are we doing here?
Yep.
Hmm.
And then you open up the next overlap, which leads to your creepy bosses.
Yeah, I did not like this one either, because I think they initially come out one at a time, and I believe you have to destroy these like little dark orbs throughout because that's what keeps reviving them.
Mm-hmm.
One of them is shooting you from afar, so you just got to kind of dodge every time you kind of hear that click. And then once you take him down, his partner comes out, and he's kind of like the tank, right? Like he's
Yeah.
just coming over there and
But before you continue on,
oh,
we
I'm
are
sorry.
talking about officers Thornton and Mulligan,
Mulligan.
uh, the small time sheriff deputies that we met kind of in the beginning of Saga's story.
Right. They are members of the Cult of the Tree, I
Mm-hmm.
believe. And when I hear their voices when you're going through that loop in the overlap, I think one of them like didn't he like shoot an innocent person because he had like a twitchy finger, whatever they call it.
Yeah, that would probably be Thornton.
Yeah.
Mulligan was the more bigger,
Yeah.
like
Lumbering. Yeah.
lumbering one, where Thornton was the I would consider him like the Steve Buscemi of the two
Hmm.
characters. If you ever seen the movie Fargo, you had
Ah. Yep. Hmm.
you had Alex Skarsgård, not Alex Skarsgård. Who the hell is
Uh. Oh my goodness. Uh.
he usually plays that famous like
mm,
crazy guy that's usually Russian.
Oh shoot. Oh man, that's been a long time. I see the his face in my head, but the name's escaping me.
Hmm. And then yeah, Steve Buscemi who's kind of like more the talkative, like ratty one,
Yeah.
and that's Thornton, the ratty one.
Yeah. What do you think of this boss fight?
I hated it.
Me too.
Mostly because Thornton, the sniper of the two,
Hmm.
like I'm always trying to dodge. Like when they finally get together, like you're constantly trying to dodge Mulligan, but Thornton's always getting the advantage of flying around and like shooting you, and it was just hard to like focus on one when the other one's like causing massive damage on you.
Exactly. And yeah, massive. You just get hit like two, three times and you're done. And all the while, you're still trying to shine light or open a flare on these like black orbs all around. So like you're playing
Mhm.
defense on two different levels while trying to do something. It was not fun.
I honestly dropped the difficulty at this point just because it was like you know, I'm not enjoying it at right now,
And
and I'm
it's
glad I did.
Yeah, and it's the small things that could have made a difference. Like when I've zeroed out on my ammo in all my boss fights. Then the game
Hmm.
like at least acknowledge. I played on standard, acknowledge it, and it drops ammo. But like you have to pick up the ammo. The reload animation takes forever. Usually I die because I'm taking too long to reload or taking too long to heal. I'm in the middle of doing the I'm wrapping myself up slowly. Bam, just blown away by Mulligan's shotgun. I'm like, all right,
Yeah,
okay.
it's I would say that's definitely a complaint is just the whole reloading definitely took a little too long.
Mm,
And the fact that the bosses are bullet sponges and you have to reload your guns, it was excruciating at times.
yeah. At the end of this, and as we notice at the end of Saga's overlap adventures, she kind of sees this vision of Wake as if they're communicating to each other through these planes, but they can barely
Hmm.
hear each other. And it mirrors if you do switch over to Alan's side, which I don't know if you
Hmm.
want to talk about our favorite chapter.
Not yet.
Okay.
Let's finish up Saga's story up
Okay.
until her point of no return.
Got it. All right. Well, then I think
Hmm.
technically next it's there's a chapter no chance where it says it's Saga, but you're kind of playing as Alan Wake. Saga needs
Hmm.
to head back to town from her trip in Watery, and in the meantime, Alex is kind of keeping Alan Wake company and talking to him in case he's not a big fan, but he kind of eventually is trying to give him the benefit of the doubt. And then all of a
Hmm.
sudden, we get ambushed by a ton of cultists, but at the same time, the dark presence is there and just killing everything in its wake. No pun intended, except for Wake. But Casey's like chasing after it. I'm surprised Casey didn't die.
Alan's like, "Give me a gun," in case he's like, "Not a chance."
Not a chance. Yeah.
Yeah.
So how Casey survived it, I don't know. And this is where the FBC intercedes in a big way. Like they just swooped in and said, "No, no, no. This is our case now."
Hmm. But during that time, you do play as Alan Wake,
Yep.
and he is trying to run and locate Casey, but at the
Mhm.
same time, he is feeling scratched nearby, and that kind of like when he does, he kind of gets like these visions of a screaming Mr. Scratch, and like
Yep.
it seems like a head zinger almost
Mhm.
that just like knocks you out for a little bit. But finally, he gets to a point in the woods where the presence is so strong that Alan Wake does actually lose consciousness, and
Mhm.
then the FBC sweeps in, and then you finally. Actually, I don't think. Yeah, no. Saga does come in at this
Yeah.
point. Like Saga does find out about everything.
And it's
No.
what's that officer Agent Kieran Estevez is like, "Yeah, Saga, we got this."
Okay, yeah. I was just trying to think. Like, I know she's in the woods and she's heading to the retirement home to see Tor and Odin to find out more what they know, but I couldn't remember if she makes a stop at Bright Falls first. But I think, yeah, I think she does. She makes a stop at Bright Falls, sees the carnage at the lodge,
Mhm.
chases after the trails into the woods, and that's where she kind of runs into Estevez, who's like, "Yeah, we have everything under control here. Alan Wake's in lockdown.
And your partner is somewhere.
Your partner, we're looking out for him."
Yeah, pretty much. So things are kind of a mess. So it's time for her to visit her relatives at the nursing home and wellness center. It's like Valhalla, right? Valhalla Nursing Home.
Hmm.
This definitely was interesting.
This is probably one of my favorite level of Saga's
Yep.
story was because not only did it have like some of the best characters,
Hmm.
it also was probably some of the more creepiest moments in the game as
Hmm.
well.
Yeah.
Mostly because of the boss taken that's kind of haunting you. Is a woman. It is actually Cynthia Weaver from the
Hmm.
first game, who is now dead, but she comes off with the terrible old woman scream.
Yeah. Known as the Drown Lady. So all those
Hmm.
years of preparing and being in light all the time, and she still kind of fell into the hauntings of her crush, Mr. Zane. So that kind of pulled her under, so to speak.
Mm-hmm.
But I agree. Lot of characters at the nursing home that made me really love it. I was surprised to see Rose there. I'm like, aren't you at the diner? I'm confused.
Well, she said the diner was only part-time.
Yeah. But she's still a kook, and this is where it became very clear to me who was responsible for the Alex Casey lunch boxes. And she at first will not give the location of where Tor and Odin are. She's just trying to kind of she's acting a little sketch to Saga. So you go around the nursing home talking to people. You end up you find Odin in really bad shape upstairs, and you have to go to your mind place and profile him. And that's where you realize, or she realizes, you realize, dang, she is truly related to them because this is an Anderson ability. The mind place is an actual real place to go where you can communicate telepathically, so to speak. So it was definitely
Mm-hmm.
like a cool reveal. So Odin can talk to her and explain, like, Tor is in trouble. He's infatuated for some reason with Cynthia Weaver. She seduced him.
Yeah, Tor kind of seems like he'd be um, a horny old goat.
True. So you need to
Um,
go and find him at the wellness center.
yeah, and so like let's talk about Rose for a second. Rose is such like she was kind of crazy in the first Alan Wake game, but like now she's like you don't know what kind of crazy is she? Is she the bad crazy? Like is she being influenced by the dark presence? Or is she being influenced by Alan Wake? Uh,
Yeah.
you find out that she's been receiving messages from Alan Wake through all sorts of things, ranging from manuscript pages to weird things in the clouds. And it's like, okay, this sounds like it could be Mr. Scratch
Hmm.
influencing her, but at the same time, it's also giving her like survival techniques and how to fight the Taken. Uh, Getting like put all these ammos aside so that um, Saga would have like putting these lunch boxes in places so that there is ammo for Saga and supplies to survive. So it's like who like you don't know whose influence is she under,
Exactly.
but
I
she
mean,
fully believes that she is connected to Alan Wake.
yeah. She makes me feel super uneasy. Uh, Also, I don't know
Mm-hmm.
if you noticed at that point, because it obviously becomes a big part of the end of the story. When I'm at the third floor, I'm like, there's this one room that I can't go into, and it has this cool little swirl on it. I remember the first time I went there, Ati appeared out of nowhere behind me, and I'm like, oh my gosh,
Like,
Ati.
no, that room will stay locked.
Yep, I'm like, okay, but I have Rose's key thing. Beep, 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 beep.
No, the swirly symbol was also in control, and that was a door you could not open.
Hmm,
Mm-hmm.
good to know.
Yep, and the swirl kind of has a little more, or kind of has more of a aha moment at the very end of Alan Wake, and why the symbol's a swirl.
Yeah,
But yeah, Adi apparently lives at the retirement home with everyone else because he's the cleaner, the janitor of that place as well. But while you're there, you are told you have to go through the wellness center, because that's where Tora ended up going, and that's a little bit creepy because
yeah.
it's dark. It's got shadowy things going around, and it's a hospital.
Yeah, that kind of aesthetic is just already super creepy, and it ended up being a lot more kind of empty, like
Hmm.
an empty threat
Yeah.
than I expected. But
You
that
don't
that
actually fight your first take until almost the end when you're in the recreation center, and that's actually that's probably one of the creepiest takens that the game throws
oh, like
at
the one
you.
that's like out of the water. Yes.
Yeah, it's like half in the water, but then the water reflection creates the bottom half of that character, and so it looks like two bodies sticking out from each other with like multiple arms waving
Mhm.
and trying to catch you.
Yeah, I think that one was another resident that was sick or something. So very cool, very creepy, very effective. I think. And let's see. I'm just trying to be mindful of time. Is there anything else you want to cover before we kind of talk about the overlap um, and the boss fight?
Well, enabled to create the overlap in this one. You have to find a music, a record,
Oh,
and have that
vinyl.
played. And this is probably one of the. This is one of the. That might be one of the first songs you get of the new Old Gods of Asgard songs. It's definitely one of my favorites. It's called Anger's Remorse, and it portrays the feelings of Thor uh, losing his daughter because of his own stubbornness.
Hmm.
Um,
Yeah, you're right. We do learn a lot more about Saga's kind of family interaction. Like you don't get like 100% of the detail, but yeah, Tor just kind of was a stubborn jerk, drove his
Thor
daughter
did not
away.
like, yeah, he did not like
The father.
Saga's husband, or
Mhm.
sorry, Saga's father. He did not like, he was very controlling of Saga's wife, Freya, or
Mhm.
sorry, Saga's mother, Freya. And then there's a whole alcoholism and just other things that just kind of drove their family apart, and it ended up like tearing Tor apart as well.
Yeah.
You also learn about Cynthia Weaver and kind of her downfall. Like we knew her as the guardian,
Lady of the Light, so to
the
speak.
Lady of the Light was her original title in Alan
Yeah.
Wake, and she was the one that safeguarded the clicker. But then we find out that she ended up losing her lamp, which was taken by Rose and put in a shoebox so that it would be found by Alan. Because this interesting thing was the connections between the dark place and the real world was a shoebox that if you put something in it, it gets transported over to another side of the world.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, we find out that Rose took that and hid it in a shoebox, which allowed the darkness to start creeping in on Cynthia Weaver, and eventually, one night when she was taking a bath, the lights went out, and the darkness kind of pulled her under and drowned her.
Hmm.
And you're thinking, you know what? That's kind of rotten. Just like this was a character that the darkness obviously hated, and the darkness was able to fully get like revenge and just absolutely like give her a violent death after
Yeah.
driving her mad.
Yes, pretty much. So great for story, but really heartbreaking for her.
Yep.
And the overlap, yeah, you use that record, and that overlap loop was very creepy. You're like in is it a
You're in a bunker.
bunker? I was like, it's ooh.
Yep. The bunker was a bunker that apparently Tor and Odin bought on the land for dirt cheap, and it is also the place where um, Saga's daughter was supposedly drowned.
Hmm.
So it had like significance to Saga. Um, it was a place of torment for the Andersons, and it was where Cynthia Weaver's ghost basically held up.
And I also hated that boss fight. The first quote unquote half is just you trying to get to where you need to go to set the stage, and you can't really attack her. She just
Mm-hmm.
follows you like a freaking shark.
Yep,
Um,
you're in a flooded place, and you have to get
mhm.
these generators operating so that you can pump water out.
Yep.
And she is in the water, and she will follow you. You don't know where she is. You just know that you get that feeling that she's chasing you once you put yourself in the water.
Done it.
Yep,
Done it.
very
Um,
shark-like.
but that wasn't even like the worst part. It was just the actual fight. I explained the Boss Rush podcast, so I won't beat a dead horse. It's just I thought I learned from the Mulligan Thornton fight, where like, all right, I need to kind of be very strategic with the lights, open up a flare, this and that. But the way she attacked, she had these two very strong attacks. One was waves of water, where I thought if I hid behind like a piece of concrete that I'd be safe from. You are not. And then these black orby shadow things that will explode upon contact and take like a third of your health away. And after like dying like 4 or 5 times and giving up and starting in the next day, I just unloaded on her immediately. No tactics, just emptying out my magazine one after the other, and that was how I ended up taking her out, and it just wasn't fun.
Hmm. Where for me, she was actually probably one of my favorite boss fights
Okay.
because of how creepy she was. Like
Creepy,
you
yeah.
first you had her first as the drowned ghost that would appear if you've been in the water too long. She'd come up and try and drown you.
Mm,
And then when you're in the actual fight arena, she's flying around, like the float. She's flying around, creepy, like posed, like white dress kind of flowing, just that like creepy drowned Japanese kind of ghost that you
mhm.
normally see. And then after enough damage, she falls down and then she runs at you and just like, just
Claws at you. Yeah.
scratching and like, you know, acting like a rabid animal. And it was kind of intense.
I do agree. At least points for like
Hmm.
creepiness, because like while she's chasing you, clawing at you, it's like she's almost weeping. Like the sound she make. Oh man, like it
Oh,
was.
yeah. The sounds that she made were just downright, crazy.
Mhm.
But you beat her.
Yep, and you beat her, and then essentially, I think the next chapter kind of slowly takes you to kind of the almost climax, the point of no return, right?
Hmm.
Called
Yep.
Scratch.
You go back to Bright Falls. You head to the sheriff's department, and you see that the sheriff's department is in complete disarray because the lights went out, and the Taken have taken over.
Exactly. Estevez is there. You kind of have to, find the fuse. I think. Oh, Alex is there, your buddy, and
Hmm.
he is wounded. And when you do profiling, even though he says he'll be fine, there is a lot of hinting that he is injured enough where there's like I don't know, this darkness or
Hmm.
susceptibility in him. I'm like, all right, this is definitely hinting towards something.
Yeah, the reports from the FBC's interrogation after they find him is like he's showing signs that he could become taken
Hmm.
at any moment. But he's like, no, I'm fine, I'm perfectly fine. And he eventually gives you the fuse. You switch it out, you go back and you find Alex in his cell, as well as the brothers,
You mean
because they
Wake?
were, yeah, sorry. You find Alan, not Alex, Alan Wake in the cell, and the
Costello
Col-
brothers.
the Cosala
Yeah.
brothers,
Cos- Cos-
Cascella,
Coscellas.
the Cascellas are on the other side, because we did find out that they were members of or they were the
Cult.
leaders of
Yeah.
the Cult of the Tree, and their raid, when the FBC came by, they did capture them.
Mhm.
And so they're screaming that Alan Wake needs to die, that he is the Dark Presence, and that he's going to bring ruin to the town. Alan Wake is like, no, that's Mr. Scratch, not me. And oh my gosh, Mr. Scratch is coming, and he all of a sudden freaks out, and you realize that Alan Wake may have actually been Mr. Scratch the entire time.
Mhm.
And Mr. Scratch flies through the prison cell and takes out
Yako.
Jaco,
Oh, poor Yako. Oh my
poor
gosh, that's such a
Jaco, and
violent
like
death.
kind of possesses like his body, or at least his clothes, which was kind of weird. Um, and then he comes after you.
Yeah, and you have a fight, kind of a fight where you need to kind of shoot him enough, and then turn on these like really super juiced up lights on him. That I'll admit that was kind of fun.
Hmm.
I mean, but also kind of fun because I'm dealing with a super devilishly angry, threatening Alan Wake, who's supposed to be the main character. And by then, I would say most people have at least played yeah, definitely at least played a chapter of Alan. So you're like, oh
Hmm.
no, I'm unloading on this author, which I'm like, how is he surviving all my shotgun blasts? But anyway,
It's because he's not Alan. He is Mr.
Mr.
Scratch.
Scratch.
And I've explained to you my kind of disappointment. For those who have played Alan Wake's American Nightmare, Mr. Scratch was the primary antagonist in that series, and he was very different in personality. Mr. Scratch comes off, if you ever seen the movie American Psycho, he comes off as Patrick Bateman, a very egotistical, very psychotic, where it's all about him. He wants to have his fun. He is open to torturing people sadistically, but makes it almost like a fun little game. And, he's jolly and dancing around in like people's viscera and stuff like that. Like he's like a jokerish kind of
Hmm.
character. Where in this game, he is just pure rage. And I hated that, but you actually brought up a very good point in the last boss rush that he is still pure ego
Hmm.
in this. It's even though he's coming off as this rage machine, it is still he is trying to warp the world into one where he is the
Worshipped.
most
Yeah.
supreme, worshipped, um, and that he's just angry at everything that kind of goes
That goes
against
his
him.
way. Yeah.
Yeah. So I did appreciate that yeah, I can still see he's pure ego, even though he's a different form of this pure ego.
Exactly. Uh,
But you do beat him,
hmm.
and he actually runs away. And you find out that you kind of then picture that Alan Wake is still somewhere in the dark place.
Yeah, I was kind of like, no, Saga. I think he's just like kind of two ends of the same coin or the possession thing. But she's like, oh, maybe he's still stuck there. So, kind of just summarize this a little bit because I do want to talk about a couple of Alan's chapters. Is they need to come up with a summoning ritual, right, with the help of
Hmm.
Alex, Odin, Tor, Estevez, which was actually really fun. It was reminiscent of one of the chapters in the first game where there's just rock and roll going on while you're just
Hmm.
blowing shit up.
I love the conversation of Odin and Tor when they're driving the van down roads that weren't actually roads.
Yes. Oh, it was
What?
great.
Watch out for them! Oh, just hit them.
Yep. Great comic relief. This was a great section. I didn't mind this section because your partner Alex was just dropping in ammo everywhere, and they weren't like
Hmm.
necessarily hard. They were just your regular taken. So
Yep, and this is also an amazing song. It's called Dark Ocean Summoning.
mhm.
And while they're playing the song and you're fighting off the whole bunch of bad guys, they have like, you see the spirits of the band kind of in the background as their
Yeah.
younger selves. And
Oh, it was very epic. I loved that part.
yep, it ends with Saga then, taking the clicker and clicking it at the end of the song to summon Alan Wake back into the world. And she comes to a realization that Alan Wake was summoned, but he got summoned back into the past where they first met him. And that's when you then are forced to go and play Alan's side of the story if you haven't been touching that.
Yeah, it's kind of like another kind of big loop thing. So, um, yeah, so Alan Wake, we did talk a little bit about the earlier talk show, um,
Hmm.
and his initial running arounds with in New York City, and
Yeah, we never actually mentioned what his goal was.
yeah, so let's do
He
that.
he
Yeah.
he kept on feeling that the Dark Presence was after Dark Presence, especially in the form of Mister Scratch, was after his wife Alice. So every time he went to these sites where a murder happened from the New York murder cult, he would then be able to go to Parliament Tower, which was his old house, and try to find Alice there, and kind of learns a little bit of what Alice is going through in the real world and how she's being haunted by the presence of Alan Wake.
Hmm.
And instead of um, trying to explain things in therapy, she decided to make it into an art show of what the dark place actually is.
Stubborn artist, but yeah, like she sets up
Hmm.
cameras everywhere, and You get to watch some real life footage of her talking. You see the pictures everywhere. It's very, again, also very creepy.
Hmm. But yeah, so Alan Wake, he wakes up again and uh, back in the TV studio. He's kind of going through a loop where something happens to him, and he then kind of like passes out and restarts again at the TV studio.
Yeah.
And this time, when he talks to Mr. Door, they decide that they're going to have a little fun, late night show style, of how they're going to talk about Alan Wake and what made Alan Wake Alan Wake.
In a musical, basically.
Yep.
This was also fun. So out of all the Alan Wake chapters, this was my favorite. It's literally like a 14-minute song. Obviously, it'll probably loop or do something if you're just hanging around, but you see everyone kind of dancing like on these mega screens, and even like the live actors that are the band members are like pointing where you should go. And this whole
Mm-hmm.
time, like, you're hearing the words, it's explaining everything from day one, how we got here. So it's literally the song and story of Alan Wake while you, Alan Wake, are running through. You're getting tons of flares and you're just blowing up Taken while you're um part of the gameplay for Alan Wake is using that angel lamp, right? And you're
Mm-hmm.
just taking light and using light to transform the environment around you. And you just basically need to get to point A to point B to point C as the song goes, till you reach the end of the climax of the song.
Yeah, there's so much going on. I mean, you have your gameplay going on, you have the real life action videos that's happening with the
Hmm.
song hitting in key places, and then when you're not moving fast enough, it's just instruments, and like you said, the characters kind of pointing you in the directions of where you need to go. Like, and the character movements are all cheesy. Like, they meant it to be like C grade acting. Like, the dance is just so like weird.
Yeah, very stiff. I'm like, ooh,
Hmm.
gosh. I'm like, it's so bad that you know that they did it on purpose.
Yeah. But the lighting in this section, like, it looks like a stage with so many screens and props, and sometimes you see the characters on the screens in the background, or sometimes you might actually see them like on a stage, that's being recorded. It's really, really cool, and you go through the whole story of Alan Wake's childhood, his rise to fame, and then his escape to Bright Falls.
Hmm.
And eventually it ends with kind of a little key, like the writer puzzle again, where you have to actually
Hmm.
end the song by putting the end note on the actual storyboard.
Yeah.
And then we get the climax of the song again,
Oh,
which,
so
yep,
good.
show me the champion of light, and I'll show
Show
you
you the
the
herald
herald
of
of
darkness.
darkness.
We're not singers for a reason. This is why we're on a podcast, but it's great.
Lost in the never-ending night, swimming up through the
Surface.
surface.
Ah!
What?
And headbanging
Hmm.
ensues.
Yeah, but yeah, it's an absolutely amazing song. I highly, highly recommend you at least see it on YouTube.
Hmm.
I'd say at least listen to the 13-minute version, which has the face melting guitar solos.
Hmm.
Um,
Absolutely.
the the Poets of the Fall is the ones who is the real life band who plays the Old Gods of Asgard, and this is almost like a rock version of their alternative version band in real life. And it's just they've. This is now technically the fourth game that the Old Gods have had music in. They first originally appeared in Alan Wake and had a few songs, and then they had a brief kind of cameo in Quantum Break, where they had like one of the characters was like humming one of the Old Gods of
Ah.
Asgard songs. And then in Control, they had an original song called Take Control, which plays during the most awesome part of that game as well. It's a musical level, but not like Alan Wake. It's like you're listening to the song while you're just basically shooting the shit out of all the hiss that were in that level, and the
Nice.
walls are like interchanging
Ooh.
in a very like artistic like way, so that you can find new ways to get through, and that was awesome. But no, this version, like their music incorporation of this game is just this is the top version right here with Herald of Darkness.
Yeah. I agree. It's like a mix between like you mentioned, was it Dragon Force
Yep,
type
Dragon
music,
Force style
but also
guitar.
like kind of almost Broadway is just the way it escalates, and then it goes to a
Mhm.
very brief jazzy like sound, jazzy like tune, and then it like a reprisal. I forgot. I'm not a
Mhm.
musical nerd, but like so it
Yeah,
has
it's almost like an encore of like
yeah
the at the end.
yeah
But the really cool thing about the old Gods of Asgard is that the music is custom made to fit the story.
yeah
Like their music tells the story, and that by following their music, you also progress through the story.
yeah. It's
It was the
brilliant.
same way with like the poet and the muse from the first one. How
Hmm.
the whole like premise of the Alan Wake story was through the music, the poet, and the muse.
Yep, absolutely.
Um,
So, if you don't mind, Pat, is there a way we can kind of maybe
Speed through Alan.
summarize? Yeah,
Yeah,
because
because Alan Wake's story honestly does not really progress too much. You find out more about the murders in New York. You find out Alex Casey and his story, uh, and you also kind of see the madness of Alan Wake in the dark. What the dark place is doing to Alan Wake and causing his madness through TVs describing the writer's journey. Like at first, they kind of come off as sane, and he's kind of coming up with these
oh,
ideas to get out. But by you get to the last few movies, and he's just like repeating himself and just making absolutely no sense and just like running all around the room, just like a complete madman.
hmm
Like you're seeing what Alan Wake's true mental state is in the dark place.
yes. I'd like
Um,
to pick your brain about the involvement of Zane.
yep, I was
Oh,
just about
perfect.
ready to get
Because
to
like
Zane.
I'll admit I did not fully follow what happened.
Zane wasn't, yeah. In this, you do run into Timothy or into
Tom,
Thomas
yeah.
Zane, and a lot of what people have been suggesting is that Thomas Zane looked like Alan Wake, like is a
Mm.
very spot on image of Alan Wake, and it's actually played by the same actor as Alan Wake. Only Thomas Zane does not have a beard. And this is weird because all the times we've known Thomas was in a diving suit in the original game.
Yes.
And he did not come off as this complete party drug user, like
Right.
crazy producer
Yeah, really
guy.
out there artist. Yeah.
In fact, what I found weird is that this guy was more in tune with how Mr. Scratch act in American Nightmare. Like,
Interesting. Okay.
yeah, just the complete like over the top and like, dude, you just gotta let it all out and be crazy, and then you get to see the whole like drug fueled scene where Alan and Tom
Tom,
are just getting drunk and doing
weird,
drugs,
getting
and
weird. Yeah.
you have the actual Poets of the Fall song, the Happy Song, which is it was also used in Alan Wake's American Nightmare. It's kind of that crazy, like it's a crazy song.
Yeah.
But you learn more that Thomas might not have ever gotten out of the dark place, that the dark place eventually kind of coerced Thomas into getting Alan on their side to write the dark presence and Tom out of the story. So Tom was kind of working with the dark presence, in
Okay,
which
because
case
that's
you,
what I was feeling, but I'm like, why would Tom want to do that? But maybe it's because it was just kind of affecting him.
yeah, Tom wanted to get out there. Tom is still stuck in the dark place just as much as Alan. And as we see, it's just a loop. The dark place always comes off as a loop. You try to do something, and, it just kind of resets again. and it just keeps doing that. And so it drove Tom crazy. The Dark Presence is like, we can use Alan to get him, to get everyone out. So it wasn't necessarily like Tom knew what was going on, but Tom, took up the offer to try to get
Got it.
himself out as well. And we see Alan Wake shoot Tom. And I
Yes.
have a theory that I don't think Tom is dead because I don't think you can actually die in the dark place.
Yeah. That also confused me. I'm like, how?
I don't think you die. I think you just loop.
You loop, yeah. So,
Because one of the scenes at the end, just when he gets back to the Parliament Tower and sees more of Alice's story, is that Alan Wake gets shot by Mr. Scratch. And then he goes into loops again.
right. Yeah. Because he's like,
Mhm.
oh, Scratch killed me. But when you get towards like closer to his end chapters, it's more like he is shooting himself,
Yep.
trying to edit it. And he is the one that's haunting Alice.
Yep. Missed that. The Dark Presence never physically came out and haunted Alice. It never physically fixed the revisions. It was basically messing with Alan's mind so that Alan would forget that he did these things and then blame it on the Dark Presence and then make changes thinking like, oh, I'm changing the Dark Presence's story.
Mhm.
Um, so it's another loop into Alan Wake's madness.
Yeah.
But he eventually does get out with the summoning ritual, but he brought in Doctor or Mister
Scratch
Scratch
with
with
him.
him because
Exactly.
the madness finally allowed Scratch, the Dark Presence, to go in
Yes.
Alan Wake just before he got summoned.
Yeah. So it's like kind of like a possession type. I don't know. It's very abstract, right? But
Hmm.
possession in the weirdest way, and the exit of Alan Wake through the chapter of Deerfest was kind of that culmination of fully understanding what the Dark Presence or Scratch wanted.
Yep. But before we got there, we go back to Saga just before or just after she finished the summoning
Oh.
ritual, and Mister Scratch
Oh, right. Yes.
appears. And so you have to fight Mr. Scratch one more time using the lights and trying to get him into the containment room. And when you do, he breaks out of Alan and he possesses Alex
I'm
Casey.
like, there you go.
So Alan is, and while Saga's then trying to save Alex from the possession, Alex then tosses Saga into the lake, which brings her into the dark place. Alan is now in the real world, but free from Mr. Scratch, and Alex Casey it went to Bright Falls to enact the ending chapter of Return, which would bring the world into Mr. Scratch's image.
Yep. And also, which is I'm hoping we might see more information in the DLC, but Tor and Odin go into Cauldron Lake to the Dark Place to help.
They got to help their fam.
Yeah, and we didn't really see them after that.
Yeah, so hopefully it's either DLC or it's a future
Yeah.
Alan Wake thing. Because I mean, just to jump ahead of yourselves, the story does not conclude itself in
Yeah.
this, or it does not conclude itself in a conclusive manner. So you take Alan Wake. Alan Wake finally freed, realizes that he cannot have the story end the way it did, and
Mhm.
so he jumps back into the dark place so that he can bring Saga, his hero, have the conversation how to really end the horror story, and that the story has to end. Not you can't just end it with like a whole cheery ending because of the genre that it is.
Yes.
That in a horror story, there are only two types of people: there are victims and there are monsters.
Monsters. Yep.
And if there is a hero, the only way the hero will succeed
It's a
is by paying
sacrifice.
a very
Mhm.
heavy cost.
That's correct. And this is as a writer, I appreciate because that's what like all my editors and like friends that I write and share manuscripts with is like everything has a price. Like or else like you could, I guess, but the readers will hate it. Like if for anything to be a
Hmm.
true good work of fiction is, yeah, you got to stay in tune with the genre, and yeah, there's kind of like that give and the take, which makes sense because for this to be successful, because it would be too easy, right, to be like, and it was all a dream, and we all lived happily ever after the end.
Hmm.
So Alan's trying to work within the constraints of what Scratch of the Dark Presence set up with the horror aspect.
Yeah. One thing we did forget to mention on Wake's side is that Wake did find out the fate of Alice. Alice
Hmm.
decided that the work was too, or that the haunting was too much, and so she went from being artist to subject in her art, and basically filmed her suicide of jumping off a cliff.
Yeah, I was like, "Whoa, whoa." I was like, "Really?" Dot, dot, dot.
Hmm. And that kind of also led to the Alan finally accepting the dark presence into him.
Mhm.
Was seeing that his one hope of like trying to save Alice, he failed in.
Yeah, it was
Uh,
heartbreaking.
yeah, it was. So Alan goes back into the dark world where he gets to the writer's room, Mr. Scratch's writer's room in the dark place. And there he can communicate with Saga,
Mhm.
who in the dark present or in the dark place, she's in the New York, but she gets instructions through,
Someone through a
yeah.
telephone, wondering
You know what?
who
We
this.
also forgot to talk about a little bit with Mr. Door again.
Yeah, it's a
Because we
lot.
and during Alan Wake's part, Mr. Door finally kind of like, "Hey, we're gonna just stop with all the fuckery here, and just say, hey, you're getting closer to what you want to achieve, but don't
Next
screw
time,
this up
yep. Next time we
because you're
meet, it's gonna
messing
be
with
different.
someone.
Yeah.
You're messing with someone that I care about, and
And that's where I'm glad you brought that up because that's where, for me, I'm like, holy shit, is this Saga's dad? But that's implied. It's not confirmed, right?
that is a good question. I did not think about that at all.
Because when I Googled, what happens when you Google after I beat the game, there are various sites that said different things. So I'm like, I'm obviously not going to rely on these as sources. So from
Huh.
my experience, when he said you're messing with someone like close to me or whatever, I'm like, could be Saga's dad, especially since Tor said like we drove your father away. Like he made some like hint about like doing something or something that he regrets that has to do with the dad. So I'm like, oh my gosh, and it'd be even cooler because Dora seems to have this power about whatever, and then the
Door has
Anderson.
the ability to walk between the dimensions, so I feel Door is going to either be something very important to the DLC or someone very important in the future of the games and how to finally get out of the dark place.
Exactly. I'm like, whoo, that's powerful. So, but
Hmm.
that's the thing about this game is like there's actually a lot here.
Yeah. I also feel like Mr. Door was probably supposed to be Lance Reddick, but at least that was my original impression because Lance Reddick was actually the character named Mr. Hatch in Quantum Break.
Oh, yeah.
But the more I thought about that, though, I would have figured Lance Reddick died this year. They would have been able to record him before. They would have had him recorded before.
True, but I'm sure they had him in mind. They did acknowledge Lance Reddick in the credits. So,
Yep.
like in honor of
Uh,
or memory of or something.
hmm
So,
So, anyways, yeah, she's in that dark place, and she gets the lamp and goes to the Parliament Tower, where she runs into the writers' room and meets Alan there, and they discuss how they're going to finish up the story.
but
That
didn't
the
she have to
hero has to.
sorry, didn't
Hmm?
she have to go through that exercise of like self-doubt? Like that was
Oh yeah, her mind place turned out to be in the dark. Her mind place in the dark place was constantly fighting her.
yes. And
It wanted her to
mhm.
doubt her. It wanted to keep her trapped in the mind place, and she was trying to break through what was fact and what was fiction.
And I want to acknowledge
Um,
that this hit home. I don't know how it hit you, but like you were a terrible partner for Alex. You're a terrible mother. You're a terrible detective. And like all the comments, I'm like, obviously I'm not a detective or whatever, but like those same doubts, I'm pretty sure the majority of people can relate to that in some way. So I really appreciated it.
Well, yeah, I mean that's kind of what the dark place does is that it breaks you down. It
Right.
makes you, it drives you insane. It is the dark place is our worst enemy. It's been that way with Alan Wake. That's
Yep.
probably why Mr. Scratch looks like Alan Wake. Is because it is the worst of Alan.
Mm.
At least that was the kind of the story of him in American Nightmare was that it's basically Alan's dark urges and wanting to take the place of Alan Wake because of ego. But yeah, that's what the dark place does. It breaks you down and makes you lose yourself so that it can eventually grow and be like, yeah, you're a bad person, which is now me.
Mm-hmm. Yep. So yeah, sorry, but
Um,
yeah, they're
yeah.
communicating, and they need to decide what hero needs to make a sacrifice.
Mhm. But the sacrifice cannot be like all most of the characters have to live, which means the hero will have to pay like an ultimate price. But the story has two heroes, so they try to balance that out, and the story ends with Alex Casey's Mr. Scratch coming into the room, and like Alan Wake kind of brings like Mr. Scratch into himself again, and while he is kind of keeping Scratch into his body, Saga shoots him with a bullet of light, killing Alan Wake and Mr. Scratch.
Mm-hmm.
So apparently that was the ultimate sacrifice, was that one of the heroes died.
Yep. And
Um,
Alex is
then we,
like, oh, sorry.
yeah, and then Saga and Alex Casey are both like, "Is it over? Did we finally win?" And so Saga, the story has its
It has its
inception
inception
moment
moment. Yes.
where she's trying to call her daughter, and the phone just keeps ringing and ringing, and then we cut the
Black.
credits.
Oh, I was like, oh gosh. And then
Hmm.
halfway through the credits, we get that like, because I think at the end of the first Alan Wake, he does the whole it's the lake in the ocean that's not an ocean or whatever. Here
Hmm.
it's he's like awake in his chair and he goes,
Well, first we get the
oh,
message
sorry.
from
Yes,
yeah.
go.
Before you get to that realization, we get the message that was for Alan Wake's eyes only. It was a final message from Alice, or at least what we think is a final message, where she's like, "I had to fake my death. The reality is, I went to the dark place, and now I'm finding a way to get you out."
But with it's because she like said that she made a trip to the Federal Bureau of Control, like something either happened or she gained
Yeah.
knowledge. But
She had an interview, or she
yep.
interviewed with them, which is also mentioned in Control. Like they had an interview with her, and she kind of came to the realization of like maybe a way that they can end the presence of the dark presence for good.
Hmm.
But she had to go back to the dark place,
Yeah, I was
and
like, yep.
so the whole thing, like her falling off, that was really her jumping into Cauldron Lake, and yeah, so she's apparently got some big plan in mind to completely end the spiral of the dark place.
Yep.
And that is when.
Alan Gas wakes up and goes, it's not a loop, it's a spiral.
Hmm.
Ooh.
With the bullet wound still in his
Yeah.
head.
I was like, oh, okay, I guess you're not dead. I
Hmm.
appreciated the path Alice took because, well, trigger warning about suicide, right? Like,
Hmm.
say what you will about suicide, but as far as character development, I'm like, oh, I really wish Remedy wouldn't do that to her. That kind of stinks. I don't want to say it's taking the cheap way out because you don't never want to talk about suicide that way. But people can throw terms like that out. But no,
Hmm.
she's actually smart and she faked her death. She's gonna go like she's like it just gave her this like whole second win. I'm like, yeah, let's go.
Yeah, it's Alice, like that. I grew a very deep appreciation of Alice. Like she was definitely the victim in the first game. Like what she had to have gone through in her own dark place before Alan switched places with her must have been terrifying for her. She was always deathly afraid of darkness, and now it's like the light is almost unbearable to her.
Hmm.
And so she's like willing to jump back into the darkness and able to like conquer like everything that just kind of has been driving her mad and frustrated and insane,
Hmm.
and that she's going and facing it head on where everyone else is kind of like trying to like stay afloat into the waves. Like it's almost like if they make an Alan Wake 3, I hope to God that she is the hero.
Oh, yeah.
Like she is the true hero of the story,
Hmm.
or at
Yes.
least be the muse that, brings Alan back to his senses.
Hmm. Yeah, definitely. What an ending. How do you feel about it overall?
Oh, the ending itself, I felt was a little bit of a cop out. Well, not cop. One of the things that it made the rest of the game feel like it almost did not have a purpose, because
Mm.
the whole idea was Alan Wake was trying to get himself out of the dark place. He gets himself out of the dark place and he jumps right back into it, and
Yeah.
he's stuck in the dark place
Yeah.
with Saga and Alex Casey and now Alice. Like
Mhm.
everyone is back in the dark place and nothing really, for the most part, got accomplished until the realization that it's not a loop, it's a spiral. It is eventually coming to an end, and it's coming to the end faster
Yes.
than they think it is.
Yeah. So I'm very curious how and in what manner it's going to be resolved. Will it all be resolved in DLC? Probably not. Will it be in a third release? Will it involve Saga? I would like to think it would involve Saga, right? But we don't know because then you've also got Alice as a factor. So there's like a lot of unknowns. So it's definitely piqued my interest. I am so very eager to see where this goes.
Yeah, I look forward to it. I'm curious to see how the Remedy verse, which is what I'm calling it, the Remedy
Nice.
verse is going to work, because I feel like they would be making a Control 2 before they jump into an Alan Wake
Yes.
3,
Yep.
but I know they have other projects that they want to work on as well. So it might still be a long time before
Hmm.
we get a conclusion to the story.
Hmm.
And I want to see a conclusion. Like I don't want it to like end the way it just did.
Yeah.
Like I don't know. I feel like I'm on the same boat with a lot of people. At this point, I want to see Alan and Alice back into the real life again, and just like the dark presence be gone.
Yeah, so it makes me think because I don't want to shortchange Saga. I think she was a great new character. So do you think maybe, or like I would be okay with, because I think it would be hard to juggle all three or four characters. Maybe the DLC will wrap up Saga's story, and then maybe eventually in Alan Wake 3 it'll be primarily like Alice and Wake. Maybe I don't know.
I mean, it could be the fact that maybe Saga and Alex aren't in the dark place anymore. Maybe they did finally get out, and
Mm.
now it's just Alan back in the dark place and Alice.
True. Yeah. Hmm.
Like maybe that was the whole idea, was uh, they managed to break. They managed to stop the whole changing of the world into Mr. Scratch's vision of it,
Yeah.
and save Saga and Alex.
Hmm.
But still have Alan being trapped into the dark place.
Nice. Well,
I mean, it's so confusing just where they're gonna go with it, but I really hope that they don't continue to drag it as far as they can. Like I
yeah.
want to see a conclusion.
Agreed. I think they're able to get away with it in a game, right?
Hmm.
But it's almost like, yeah, if you do that again, then it's gonna be like, all right, come on, guys, let's wrap it up.
Yeah.
Um, I know we're coming toward the end, but if I could speak quickly to side quests, I think my favorite were the nursery rhymes. Definitely brought in the FBC. They were fun, and I like the charm bracelet mechanic to give you a little bit of buffs.
Hmm. Yeah, the nursery rhymes, I do kind of like the small alterations to the world that they did. Um, like like maybe it's a story about how like a beast wandered into a house or something, and then all of a sudden you find like the said beast. Or I just like the little twist that they had.
Mhm.
But overall, I was not very impressed with the side quests in this
Okay.
game.
Hmm.
Um,
Well,
I
that's the
don't
thing.
know.
Like the nursery rhymes were really the best because cult stashes. Okay, what I'm gonna go through a bunch of Taken to get more stuff.
Hmm.
Alex Casey lunchboxes were kind of,
Same deal,
yeah, they were power
just
ups.
without puzzles to open up the chests.
And then for Alan Wake's side, it was the words of power, which,
Hmm.
judging by like the number of lines, I don't think was close to getting them all.
No, same here. Like again, that's just one of those things that if you missed it, it's like, yeah. And honestly, like half the powers I probably didn't use. Like
Yeah.
you like beefed up the ones that I knew I was gonna use, but then some of the other ones I'm like, meh, I'm just gonna throw a point here just because like maybe when using flare, I hardly use the flares in the game to be
Mm,
perfectly honest with you.
yeah. Yeah. So I wouldn't say side quests were a strong suit, but I just did want to at least do a shout out of the nursery rhymes. And in a
Mhm.
sense, it had its own level of creepiness, depending on the nursery rhyme itself.
Yep. I mean, it does. The nursery rhymes does actually conclude the story if you get to the final nursery rhyme.
Oh, yes. Yes.
Hmm.
Sorry, that was very satisfying.
Yeah. You find out about the doctor that's manipulating the nursery rhymes and trying to manipulate the dark place, and the dark place ends up swallowing him.
Swallowing them. See, the lesson learned here, guys, don't play around with things that shouldn't be played around with.
Hmm.
Hmm.
Yep.
So,
All right, but yeah, I think for now we can probably put a bookmark into the Alan Wake 2 until we get some expansions here, and then maybe we can revisit
yeah,
this again.
I think that'd be great because yeah, this is definitely a game that I feel like we can continue to dissect so many different aspects of it. But this is a nice, hearty, almost 2 hour episode. Thank you so much for listening to us. We want to hear what you think of Alan Wake 2, maybe hear some of your theories. Not that people at Remedy or Sam Lake would be listening to this, but shout out to Remedy Entertainment. They did a fantastic job, and I wish them well at the Game Awards. They have 8 nominations that they're up for.
Yep, including Game of the Year and Best Direction. If they don't get Game of the Year, I sure as hope they get Best Direction.
Exactly. Agreed.
Like Sam Lake freaking deserves this one.
Yes. Well, Pat, thank you so much for talking about this game with me. This was a game I really want to talk to someone about, and I'm just glad
No, it's
to.
a game that you need to talk to someone about.
Yeah.
There's a lot to go on, and it helps digest and bring up theories. Like I didn't think about the possibility of Mr. Dora being Saga's dad,
Mhm.
and now all of a sudden it's got me wanting to go down that rabbit hole.
Well, and I think how that whole debate of is our video games art, whatever stance you want to take on it. I was gonna say if any game were to be a representation of art, this is definitely one of them.
Hmm.
Alrighty. Well, thank you again, listeners. Again, check us out on the Boss Rush podcast. If you're interested in becoming a Patreon, because if you're a patron now, you'll be getting this episode earlier. Definitely consider it. We want to be able to put out content for you guys. And if you are a patron, I think at the $5 tier, you can also vote on future book club games.
Hmm.
So until
Right
then,
now we have a poll out
yep.
there, and we're thinking Super Mario RPG is probably going to be our January/February book club.
Yeah, I would not mind that at all. I just started it
Hmm.
tonight. It's very good.
I'm still waiting for my copy, but I was stupid enough to forget to reserve it.
Oh,
So,
boo.
yep, that's my fault, but I have other things to play,
Exactly.
so I'm not too torn up about it this time.
All right, Pat/Tor. This is Stephanie/Odin wishing y'all a good night.
Enjoy until next time.
Bye.
Bye.
If you want to be a Patreon producer, head on over to patreon.com/bossrushmedia, and find out which tier is right for you. Our Patreon producers at the $5 tier or higher for this month are Adriel Munger, Celeste Roberts, Christian S., Sana Dierig, Francisco Santillan, and Rebecca Jewell. Thank you for your continued support.